Come back again whenever you're near. Join us and then we'll make it clear. Around the world you will always be welcome at Rotary. Encore.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome again to Brad Stewart. He was introduced last week. So welcome to you, Brad. Thanks for becoming a member. And I think up next is our announcements. And we are, as most of you know, we are selling Christmas wreaths this year, holiday wreaths, excuse me. They'll be $30. And I shared this post. I shared Rotary's post on my Facebook and Instagram yesterday, and I already sold a couple. So if it's a competition, I might be ahead of the curve here. So
I'm ahead of you. I bought 10. I'm ahead of you.
Oh, darn it, you are. That's right. I did not sell 10 yesterday. But yeah, keep this in mind. All of the proceeds are going to be benefiting mostly the holiday basket campaign. And then on the slide, you can see just the entities that they will be benefiting. So thank you. Thank you for all of your effort there. That would be much appreciated. At this time, I don't believe there are any more announcements. I will introduce our speaker today.
Am I on? Is it?
Yes, Kent, you're on.
Yep, yeah, I can hear you, Kent.
Sorry, the sound cut out on me. I apologize. Today we have just a phenomenal opportunity to hear a historical perspective on Rotary, and our guest to share this on the Rotary Peace Pipe is one, Anthony Conn. Anthony is a field agent with the Knights of Columbus Insurance, as well as president of Conn Communications. He served 10 years in the United States Army as an officer in the Corps of Engineers, and he was stationed in South Korea, Germany, and the United States. Anthony is a graduate of St. Ambrose University with a BS in mathematics. He has served and continues to serve on many civic organizations in the community. He's currently treasurer of the Keokuk Area County Foundation and board member and foundation chair of Rotary Club of Keokuk. He's president and co-founder of Peace Pipe Proposal, Inc. With him today, we also have Joachim, did I say that? Joachim? Yogi.
Excellent.
Thank you, Reppmann. And he was born in Flensburg, Germany. Yogi matriculated at the University of Kiel, where he studied history, American literature, and philosophy. In 1978, and fueled by his fascination with the America from reading Wild West fiction novels, he decided to travel to the United States to learn everything he could about our country. He's written several books on notable Schleswig-Holstein immigrants and the mass migration to the United States. He served as a professor of German at St. Olaf and Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota, and chaired several conferences. The Steuben Society of America's History Award in 2014 has been presented to him for his research on the 1848 movement's democratic impact in Germany and the United States. And it is with pleasure I have the opportunity to have these gentlemen share the story on the Peace Pipe proposals. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much for having us. Yogi, it's gotten windy here, and I just switched over to Elon Musk's satellite internet service, and the wind's playing tricks with my dish on top of the house. So Yogi, I'm going to have you share the slides. So the backup.
I'm happy to do. I just move the slides in now here. here we are. Tony, you start. And special greetings to Bill Tubbs, Scott County, Iowa, longtime governor, most professional Rotarian I ever have met. Bill, thank you for joining us. Moin, moin.
Okay, folks, the story we're telling today concerns two of Rotary's basic essential values: mutual understanding among the people of the world and a commitment to supporting world peace. The story begins 90 years ago, 1931. The third Rotary International Convention outside the United States took place in Vienna, 6 years after the first Austrian club had been founded in that city. Rotarians from around the world arrived at the country's capital. Among the speakers at the convention were numerous important personalities of that period. Among them, textile manufacturer Max Weinmann, a founding member of the Munich Rotary Club, who was honored by Rotary International for his service. Also, Robert Cecil of Britain, one of the architects of the League of Nations, who was granted the Nobel Prize for Peace, 1937. Among the 4,300 attendees at the Vienna conference was 33-year-old American William Jewett Fulton, a member of the Rotary Club of Keokuk, Iowa. This small town of 10,000 inhabitants on the Mississippi River is named after a positive-minded Indian chieftain. Unlike his peers, Chief Keokuk did not go on the warpath against the white Americans, who in the 19th century had penetrated ever further into the lands of the indigenous peoples. Instead, he chose a path of negotiation and the quest for peaceful solutions.
Following the Vienna Rotary Convention, Austria, Fulton and his charming spouse, Louisa, traveled for several weeks throughout Europe, where his impressions were impacted by economic, social, and political tensions of that time, in many ways similar to those occurring in the US. Dark clouds were forming in Europe and throughout the world. The global economic crisis of 1929 had entered its third year with no sign of improvement. Nations imposed punitive tariff duties for imported goods as a means of helping the home economy. Banking systems were collapsing. Nationalism was on the rise. When Fulton returned to Keokuk, he reported to his fellow Rotary Club members on the disquieting mood he had sensed during his trip in Europe. And the Rotary Club Keokuk decided to issue a warning about the pervading general unrest of the day. And so the small club from Keokuk set out in December 1931 to send out a message by letter to all non-English speaking Rotary clubs outside the United States around the world. Over 500 letters were individually typed, addressed, and sent by mail. Here is the letter sent to the Rotary Club of Paris. Tony, please.
Among other things, the latest letter stated, following the old Indian custom, we invite the Rotary Club of Paris to smoke the pipe of peace with us in spirit as our expression of international goodwill and fellowship. We would be most happy to receive a reply from you, as it is our sincere desire to establish and perpetuate Rotary contacts and friendships outside of our country. Of the 504 letters Fulton sent, he received a total of 200 responses from 44 different countries. By chance, these neatly filed away letters were found in a bank safe a few years ago, having almost been disposed of by the bank. I rescued this treasure in 2016, and Yogi and I published it in book form in June 2019. It is extremely fascinating to study these letters against the background of their historical context, and at the same time to find a great deal that bears on our own time. It is not possible to do justice to the diversity represented here in 20 minutes, but I'd like to share a few select letters with you in this program.
29 German clubs were among those that received the letter from Keokuk in December 1931. And of these, 15 sent responses back to Keokuk. Here is the response from the Rotary Club of Munich.
signed by its first secretary, Emil Hirsch. I quote from the second paragraph. Your club's idea that we Germans should smoke the peace pipe with you in the spirit is delightful. When your letter was read to us at our last luncheon, we unfortunately did not have a suitable pipe on hand and had to make do with cigars. We hope that this was a worthy replacement. As humorous as these lines may sound, Hirsch's own membership in Rotary came to an ignoble end. He was expelled from the club as a Jew in April 1933, only 1 year after this letter. In 1935, he was forced to vacate his successful antiquarian bookstore. Finally, in 1938, he was able to emigrate to the United States, bringing along a large number of his valuable books. He settled in New York City and worked in another well-known antiquarian bookstore on Madison Avenue, owned by German emigrant Walter Schatzky from Frankfurt. At the time of Emil Hirsch's expulsion, Rotary Club President Wilhelm Ahrens wrote the following lines to another member, quote, "You will no doubt have followed the developments in Germany sufficiently to understand that we consider your removal from our list of members unavoidable. Yours faithfully, the president of the Rotary Club of Munich." The member who had been excluded was the writer Thomas Mann. When he was granted the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1929 for his novel Buddenbrooks, the event was elaborately celebrated in Munich, and the Rotary Club of Munich prided itself on having such a special founding member. Thomas Mann had a Jewish wife, however, and soon was considered to have a, quote, Jewish interrelationship, and in the eyes of the Nazis had committed, quote, racial defilement. Mann and his family found refuge in Switzerland before they immigrated to the US in 1939. He taught at Princeton University before retiring in Los Angeles. In 1952, Mann returned to Switzerland and died a few years later. In 1942, the Rotary Club of West Los Angeles made him an honorary member. Thomas Mann and Emil Hirsch were not the only ones who were deemed unacceptable. By June 1933, the Rotary Club of Munich had expelled a total of 26, or approximately 40% of its membership. Max Weinmann, mentioned earlier as the distinguished speaker at the Vienna Rotary International Convention 1931, committed suicide alongside with his wife Rosie on June 23rd, 1940. They too were Jewish. Max was forced to remove himself from his successful business, and the people were now being removed from the home. The Weinmanns decided that death was a better option than hopeless situation they were facing. In the following year, 6 members of his immediate family were murdered by the Nazis at the concentration camp Bergen-Belsen and Auschwitz. Tony?
Here's a response from Rotary Club of Heilbronn, signed by Walter Schilling, an entrepreneur in the coffee business and a founding member of his club. In his 2-page letter, he draws a parallel between the Red Sons of Manitou, referring to the American Indians, who had to defend themselves and their land against the white man, and the Germans of his time, who were beleaguered by a great wave of refugees. Schilling writes, "Once upon a time, we too were blessed by a great God above us, but then there came the people of the whole world, and we too were struggling for life and nearly annihilated. There were too many for us, and the sunny times faded away." Schilling is referring here to the great wave of refugees from the Weimar Republic, Eastern Europeans who fled to Germany from the ruins of the collapsed Russian Empire. Many Germans did not welcome the largely Jewish refugees of that time, who were housed in emergency dwellings at the expense of the German taxpayers. People were afraid of an increasing pressure on the already damaged economy, the threat to inner security, and the Judification of the Western world. The German census of 1925 recorded approximately 108,000 foreign Jews. Protests erupted throughout the country, attacks and riots. Newspapers that had spoken out for democracy and the humane treatment of immigrants were defamed as the Jewish press. We know that the National Socialists took advantage of these sentiments for their own purposes, and we now see clear parallels to our present situation.
At the Rotary Club of Berlin, established in 1929 at the Hotel Kaiserhof, in the presence of several Rotarians from other nations, the leading lights of Berlin society gather: politicians, industrialists, highly placed administrative officials, physicians, scholars, artists, architects, and writers. Heinrich F. Albert, a former government minister in the Weimar Republic, served as its first president. Among the founding members were the former Weimar Republic Chancellor Hans Luther and Adolf Moosbach of the Kaiser Wilhelm Society, who was director of the German Academic Exchange Service and one of the club secretaries, named in this letter. Foreign diplomats were among those who appeared regularly at the club meetings. The response letter from Berlin to Keokuk is signed by the secretary Heinrich von Gleichen. Here is what he wrote, quote, "Precisely in these grave times in which war is raging in East Asia and conflict prevails almost everywhere in the world, indications of peace, such as those expressed in your letter, are always welcome. Please extend to your president and all of your club members our most cordial greetings, along with the expression of our friendship, which connects us German Rotarians with all those in America." Von Gleichen was a conservative journalist, the founder and organizer of numerous associations, and the owner of 2 feudal estates in Thuringia. Following the National Socialist rise to power, von Gleichen was one of 88 German writers who signed an oath of faithful allegiance to Reich Chancellor Adolf Hitler in October 1933. As early as 1924, von Gleichen had founded the German Gentlemen's Club. In 1933, the club launched the Dirksen Foundation, which was intended to further contacts between traditional society elites and National Socialists. Leading Nazis, such as Heinrich Himmler and Ernst Röhm, sat on the foundation's board of trustees. Heinrich von Gleichen was arrested by the Russians after World War II and detained for several months. His properties in the Soviet occupation zone, later East Germany, were expropriated. Following his release from captivity, he fled from the Soviet zone to West Germany, Göttingen, where he died in 1959. Oskar Zampell, the club president, sat on the board of the United Steelworks Ltd. During the Nazi period, his Kaserne played a significant role in German rearmament, using forced labor along with regular workers. In the last years of the war, at the concentration camp in Buchenwald, he ran a sub-camp at the United Steelworks plant in Dortmund, where 745 women lived in a building that was connected by underground tunnel to an ammunition factory. The building had barbed windows and the outer doors were sealed. Bernhard Menassi, who was Jewish, held the office of treasurer from 1929 to 1933. Following temporary detention in the just mentioned concentration camp in Buchenwald, he emigrated to Shanghai, China, and later returned to Berlin, where he died in the 1980s. Tony?
Here's a response from the Rotary Club of Darmstadt, signed by its secretary, Walter Treer. Together with his cousin Ernst, also a member of the club, ran the Treer Furniture Factory, which supplied European royal houses with its products. Both men were Jewish. Ernst committed suicide while in jail following the forced sale of his business in 1938. Walter was able to flee to England in 1936, but for reasons unknown, his wife and only child ended up in the Lodz ghetto in Lodz, Poland. There they both died May 8, 1945. In the upper left-hand corner of the letter is the name of the president at that time, Dr. Karl Merck. In 1932, he became chairman of the executive board of the Merck family business, Merck Pharmaceuticals. In the Nazi period, he also held several public offices associated with the National Socialist Party. During the war, Merck's factory used a great number of forced laborers. In the context of denazification, however, Karl Merck was not classified as a group of active participants. He had to only make a payment of 2,000 Reichmarks as a fellow traveler. It becomes clear that the lives of various Rotarians inevitably developed in different directions. The website memorial.d-1800.org and the highly commendable book Rotary Under Nazi Rule point out that between 1932 and 1933, a total of 500 names disappeared from Rotary membership lists, almost 1/3 of all Rotarians in Germany at that time. Jews, Freemasons, Marxists, and Social Democrats, and other unwanted members were removed. Rotary International did scarcely anything to intervene, and in fact, from the 1920s on, had no concerns about the member contact with fascist authoritarian dictatorships. The survival of the club was apparently more important to the international organization than its commitment to basic Rotarian values. Only a small number of clubs showed solidarity with their Jewish members and preempted their dismissal by dissolving their clubs themselves. Finally, in 1937, all German and Austrian clubs were banned and dissolved. At the end of the 1940s, new clubs were founded or reestablished in part with individuals who had held important positions during the Nazi dictatorship. And by the way, the photograph on the book cover is of a Rotary district meeting in Wiesbaden, the year 1935. The original was retouched for a post-war publication, and the swastika replaced by the Rotarian wheel, as if it were possible to whitewash history after the fact. Here's another letter response, this time from Rotary Club in Novara, Italy, located 40 miles west of Milan. It was written when Dolce Benito Mussolini had almost reached the peak of his dictatorship, tolerated by the Italian king. Its president, Alfredo Periani, writes, I quote, "We feel much honored that Italy's flag has been so well received by your club, and we are particularly grateful to the giver of it, who has remembered our country, which by means also of Rotarian clubs shows vital strength and eternal youth, which has its foundation in Rome. Youth made new again by our Risorgimento and Fascismo, resurrection and fascism. I do not know why the typeface seems to be kind of washed out. Maybe this was caused by the tears of other nations in Europe, suffering from depression and militant threats. Of the 8 responding Italian clubs, 4 give full-throated support to Mussolini and the fascist movement."
This 3-page letter shows the other side of the coin. It was written by Arthur Renier from the Rotary Club of Charleroi in Belgium, a country bordering Germany. After thanking the club in Keokuk for its initiative, the club president states, quote, "No need to tell you that our district is greatly affected by present conditions of trade. We have thousands and thousands of unemployed, and it is with a certain amount of anxiety that we see next winter season approach, when so many will suffer from the fact that there will not be much money left in the house to buy the necessary food." The responses from all over the world were mostly typed, though a few were handwritten, sometimes with beautifully designed letterheads. On the left is an example of the Rotary Club in Gefle, Sweden, and on the right are the typed weekly minutes of the Rotary Club in Turin, Italy. Below, that is the stylish letterhead of the Rotary Club of Johannesburg, South Africa. On the left is the response from the Rotary Club of Kolin in the Czech Republic. The text says, "At our last meeting, we smoked the peace pipe with you, only symbolically, of course, since we did not have a pipe of that sort on hand. Instead, we drank a glass of Pilsner to your health. On the right is the response from the Rotary Club of Orosháza in Hungary with a suitable illustration.
We enjoy a close friendship with the Rotary Club of Jerusalem, the only English language club in Israel. This club too sent a letter of response to Keokuk on the day before Christmas, 1931, Christmas Eve, 1931. The Rotarian spirit is very well expressed here. The club president writes as follows: we have all sorts in our clubs, about 10 nationalities, at least 5 different languages represented, and we all find in Rotary a common meeting ground in spite of differences of race, religion, and tongue. We have strong club.
We have
Disagree.
strong.
Go ahead, Yogi. That's cutting out.
We have strong Zionists and equally strong anti-Zionistic Arabs in the club, Britishers, Americans, and Germans, etc. And they all meet amicably as Rotarians, although acutely disagreeing on most other points. He continues, one of my warmest friends is a German surgeon who, as a combatant officer, faced the trenches at La Bassée, First World War, in which I was serving. So you will see that we are ourselves a sort of living pipe of peace always being smoked. As has already been mentioned, 201 responses from all over the world arrived in Keokuk, which means that approximately 40% of the clubs that received letters responded to the suggestions to symbolically smoke the peace pipe together. Letters came from Copenhagen and Calcutta, Kyoto and Keijo, today known as Seoul, Wellington and Winnipeg, Montevideo and Madras, as well as from Hawaii and Alaska, which at the time were not yet part of the United States. Letters from Cuba and China arrived as well, countries in which Rotary no longer has a role to play. It is extremely interesting to study these letters, to consider the makeup of the world in 1931, and to follow the fascinating lives of the Rotarians of that period. In conclusion, we strongly recommend to you a publication titled The Peace Pipe Letters, a truly stimulating book. All of the letters from 1931-32 projected are pictured in its 330 pages letter size. The book is available through Tony Conn. Cost is $30, profits fund Rotary Peace Project. And Tony also has that book in English, Rotary Under Nazi Rule. Both books are most moving. We have now reached the end of our peace pipe story and our presentation. But before we return to your wunderbar president, we would like to give you a brief update, because the story that began over 90 years ago is continuing today. In 2019, the Rotary Club of Keokuk, Tony Conn, wrote yet another letter to every club that received the original 1931 letter from Iowa. We wanted, once again, specifically at the Rotary Convention in Hamburg, 2019, to smoke the peace pipe in common. And so the peace pipe letters brought together in that city 135 Rotarians from 68 clubs in 21 countries. All these new Rotarian friends traveled 2 hours in 2 large buses to our spacious German apartment in Flensburg, border town to Denmark. In this picture, I welcome our international guests in the front garden of our dwelling in the old city of Flensburg at 4 o'clock with our first highball, bourbon and Schweppes ginger ale. The book party for the peace pipe Letters to Friends 1931-2021 could begin. Our enthusiastic Rotary book festival lasted until well into the night with gallons of highball. With the peace pipe letters and Rotary under Nazi rule as background, Tony and I are organizing an international Rotary conference on the subject of dealing with the past. The conference will take place as a hybrid event, attendance video, in May 2022 in Northfield, Minnesota. Members of the Rotary Club of Ames are invited to attend. Discussion points at the conference will concern how to find appropriate ways of dealing with the dark chapters of history. 400 years of slavery in the New World will be discussed, as well as Germany's confrontation with the Holocaust. Today, we sense once again that fundamental values of our communal life are under threat. The commitment to peace and mutual understanding among different people of the world, within this country and even in our neighborhoods, remain a constant challenge and a perpetual task for Rotarians. We are glad to take any questions as time permits. If time is short, we will remain after the meeting. Thank you very much. Moin moin. All the best from Keokuk, Tony, and Northfield, Yogi. Billy Boy, Bill Tubbs, you must have the floor with the first question. What do you think, Tony? Don't you think Bill should introduce himself?
Well, greetings. Your presentation has improved and you've added detail. The stories of the individual members that you tell are fascinating and really connect. We can feel the diversity of we can identify people in our own clubs who may be just like those others.
Thank you, Bill. I could tell now many fun stories about your Rotary roots and everything, but that should happen later. Maybe the president, the lady president.
There is a question on the chat from Jean Cressy, asked if, has Rotary International ever made a statement that acknowledged their lack of leadership during those troubled years?
Maybe Tony will answer too, but as far as I know, as we know, I think no. What was a great move, maybe you recall our world president through June this year, Holger Knag, happens to be from our home state of Schleswig-Holstein, and he made a strong statement as a Rotary World President that when there is injustice and challenges, it was before January 6th and before the history of Holocaust and Germany's mass murdering, one must be, Rotarians ought to have a position, and we should not be too afraid that Rotary is normally not political, but everything is political. So we are thankful that Holger sort of indirectly supported us with his statement that those messages Tony and I tried to deliver before the background of the Keokuk peace letters 1931. There are so many parallels, resemblances all over the world. Therefore, that is perhaps the first statement, but Rotary International, as most organizations, to face those parts of history is not easy, I'm afraid.
Rotary International did take a stand towards the mid to end of the Second World War. The first time, they intentionally stayed neutral, stayed out of politics, but it was so outrageous that they did make a stand on that. It was too little, too late. Most people will agree. But to answer your question, yes. You see that question, Yogi?
No.
Who will be speaking at the Northfield conference?
Well, yes, we have wonderful visitors, guests. Grace Van Zyl, Rotary Club Johannesburg, the first Rotary Club in Africa, celebrated the centennial last year, this year, Tony. And she is talking about Nelson Mandela, apartheid politics. We have an excursion to the Rondo Center, part of St. Paul, our capital. In the 1960s, interstate was built through that. A very, very striving, wonderful African-American community. So we have experts for that. We will have amazing charismatic speakers also about Native American topics. So Rotarians and specialists at this work conference will speak.
When you take your work, and this is Jeff Johnson, when you take your work and overlay it with today's issues of racial injustice, critical race theory, immigration, and so forth. Again, as you said, to not be political when everything is political, and to be in a state like Iowa now, which in most cases has been a leader in this space, one could say we are relinquishing that leadership and have become extremely political. How do you and how will the conference address, if it is, topics such as critical race theory, immigration, and social injustice?
Maybe I start, Tony. Jeff, thank you. A+ question. This is exactly what we have in mind. Just to boil it down, what our dream, our vision, Jeff, is that we have Europeans, German Rotarians from South Africa, and especially to have German Rotarians and their clubs represented. For example, some years ago, an artist in Cologne developed the concept of stepping stones. That is, that in a bronze cobblestone, 4 by 4 inches, on the downtown areas of many cities in Europe, especially in Germany, where Jews had lived and who were murdered at concentration camps, this bronze stone with a name, where and when they were born and when they were murdered. So we hope that such projects, which we have started as part of our Holocaust education in the last 30 years in Germany, Jeff, that possibly at the conference with people like you and other Rotarians from America, that we can join forces and implement similar things of the 1619 New York Times project, when the very first slaves arrived in America. And therefore, all the implications, and as you know, it is something very sensitive in terms of political correctness. Even the term peace pipe, we had to learn that there are folks who think we should not use it. But as a historian, when we put it into this historical context, then we must use it. So it is a very complex story. You used all racial theory, all the emotional things, but isn't that amazing that 1931, 32, we had, with these letters from Keokuk and the answers, kind of that paved already in those days the discussion which we have to have with Rotarians from Germany and America together.
Yeah, some of those issues are, we can draw clear parallels. It's scary how much you see these things repeating themselves. Others not so clear. you know, as far as the critical race theory, I don't know, what is there to dispute about the theory? That I really don't think. I think the dispute is, in my view, is should we talk about it or not? That's the dispute. It's really hard to deny the theory itself. You know, the winners always get to write history, and that's what we're finding here. And that's the whole reason for the conference. You know, Columbus discovered America and the 60 million natives that lived here as well. Those are the type of things in history that we like to bring up and say it's not the way you've been taught.
Maybe I'm adding, is everybody seeing sort of the cover of this book?
No.
Okay, whatsoever. 1922, and Tony included one of the 5-6 letters from Rotary clubs of Italy who answered back to Keokuk. And in 1922, Benito Mussolini, his title Duce, dictator, leader, Führer. As a former socialist, he had started the fascist black shirt movement. And in Milano in 1922, he gave a speech to 30,000 folks and said, let's march to Rome and topple the democratic government. And well, they marched to Rome and toppled without Benito Mussolini. That concept, up to details as the first populist, Mussolini, before the Second World War, was copied by Adolf Hitler, first in 1923 and then in 1933. And up to details, what happened on January 6th is to 102% the playbook of Mussolini from 1922. And that is the striking thing, the moving force in behind of Tony and myself, that these Rotary peace pipe letters are telling us so many details about our days, our situation in Germany, in America, in Europe, worldwide.
Again, Jeff here. How has Keokuk today taken your book and what it has uncovered and how it sees itself as a club today?
Well, I wish I could give you good news on that. This project, it's been supported by the club, but you know, we're you know, Iowa's population is the same. You know, you had a guy traveling from Iowa State University talking to Rotary clubs right now. I don't know if he's made it to Ames or not. He gives an outlook on the economic outlook for Iowa and these communities like Keokuk that are shrinking, and our population's getting older, and it's represented in our Rotary Club. What used to be 110 members are down to 35, and they're pretty old. I'm afraid we're continuing to shrink. So there's just not the energy, there's not the interest there to pick this up. I moved here from Johnston about 13 years ago, and really just to occupy my time, I got involved in Rotary, and I happened onto this thing, and it's just what I enjoy doing. But to answer, not much support from Keokuk. It's been myself, it's been Yogi, but I've had a lot of international contacts that have jumped in on this. I even extend that to the Rotary Club of Ames. If there's somebody out there who's a wannabe historian and learn more about this, you know, we've extracted stories out of the German letters. We've extracted stories out of the Northern Balkans letters. We have a very good Northern Balkans presentation. And I just finished up one of the most tragic and interesting Rotary stories I've ever ran into is we have a letter from the Rotary Club of Tallinn, Estonia. And we have the signer of the letter is the first prime minister of that country. And what happened to that Rotary Club is just so tragic that it deserved a presentation by itself. So love to come back and share any of those with you if you'd like. And anybody want to get on board and take part, we always welcome to come join in.
Dear Jeff Johnson, I would love, or we would love to have your email address or cell phone, and we would love to have you as a speaker at our conference, period.
I'll put it in the chat.
Jeff, my grandmother would say, Jeff is the best. Stephen Jones, Tony is asking for the book. Should we give?
I'll put my email up.
Yeah, to everyone, please write to everyone. Steve Jones, both books, Rotary Under Nazi Rule, very short but precise, condensed, great photos, gives a wonderful overview, in depth of what we started to talk. And then our book, 330 pages, letter size, all Rotary answers from all over the world. Just stunning. That is bigger size and so on, but both is moving and a wonderful gift. Jeff, I have your phone number, 515-231-9206. Tonight or tomorrow, I phone you, Jeff, or after midnight, and invite you for a bourbon ginger ale.
I'm open to a conversation.
Any others?
Any other
One
questions?
interesting, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Nope, go ahead. I was just asking if there's any other questions.
Oh, I was just going to mention that a lot of these letters came back. You can see they were in German, they were Italian. In 1930s, there was still the immigrants that had settled in Keokuk were still close enough that many of them still spoke that language. And so Jewett Fulton, he was the general manager, president of a factory here in town, and he used his own resources to translate those letters, and those translations are included in the book on his company letterhead. He asked Rotary International for support in that, and he was told, just like today, if you ask for support from RI, you're going to say, sorry, we can't do it. But he did have we have several letters from Paul Harris where these two corresponded back and forth. He had a close relationship with Paul Harris.
Wonderful. Well, on behalf of the club, thank you. That was your energy, your knowledge of all of that was incredible. So thank you so much. That was very interesting. Just thank you so much. So virtual claps. Thank you. Oh, but looks like we have a question at the chamber we are trying to ask. Let's try and let's see if you can't ask it over the microphone, maybe type it into the chat box.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, this is Carl Byrne at one of the remote sites. In hindsight, in light of all of the problems in Germany in 1931, what could the Rotary clubs have done differently? And it's easy to look at it and see that now.
Well, maybe I start and then Tony. Well, I'm not a hero by no means and so on. But when you think that on January 30th, Carl, 1933, through a democratic election, Adolf Hitler came into power. In May, a few months later, there was the first book burning. Many, many German cities, especially downtown Berlin, all this high quality books of Thomas Mann and Jewish authors and so on were burnt. But already in April 1933, there was no pressure at that time by the Nazi administration on the German Rotary clubs. Even at that time, before there was any need, the Rotary clubs started to kick out their Jewish members. And 90% or a huge percentage of the Jewish community in Germany, around 500,000, very successful lawyers, musicians, name it, professionals, never had seen a synagogue from inside. They were totally naturalized. And all these guys, patriotic Germans, were pushed out of Germany in the beginning, but more and more pushed into concentration camps, murdered and so on. And that very few German Rotary clubs had any solidarity with their close friends and members. That is devastating, Carl, even today. So what would have done different? But that's why German Holocaust education tries to stress that if there is unjust, you better stand up. If there is African American in a subway and is treated poorly by somebody, you better stand up. That is at least an attempt in German society and education system nowadays.
I'll go further than that. You know, if you looked at the proceedings from the 1931 convention in Vienna and look at the speakers and then look at the subjects, and they have the text of that in the proceedings, they're talking about tariffs, and they're talking about disparity of income and the belligerent nations rearming themselves in a time of economic downturn, the world economy. And they were making mention, hey, when you have conditions like this, you're inviting these nationalistic ideas. People are looking for somebody to blame. And so they foresaw what was happening without a doubt. During the 1970, you had the Bolsheviks came into power, and then behind them you have the Italians and the Germans. And it seems like that they were more concerned about the Soviet socialists, with the work camps and the collective farms and that type of ideology, than they were of the fascists, of the Italians and Germans. So it was almost like let the Germans fight the Russians, because we really don't like either one of them, but we really don't like the Soviets more. That it?
There is, Tom Walsh is asking for the dates for the peace conference. He's also saying thank you for your research and your presentation.
You're welcome very much. Thank you. It's 23rd to 27 May of next year.
Unfortunately, my wife has now a physical PT therapy by WhatsApp. So I have to say goodbye. Kelsey, Bill Tubbs, Tony Conn, Jeff Johnson. We will have contact very soon. Sorry that I'm moving out of this, but fond memories of Ames, and especially to Karen, your executive secretary. Great event manager. Bye-bye.
Well, you deserve a second thanks. So thank you again for your knowledge and energy for that presentation. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Next week, we will, I think, County Foster Care will be our guest and speaker next week. She will provide the presentation. Next, let's go ahead and stand and recite the four-way test. In all that we think, say, or do, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you. Have a great week, everyone.